The judge didn't bang the gavel when the number 44 million hovered above our heads like a chandelier wired wrong. She leaned forward, lowered her voice, and asked me the calmest, cruelest question I've ever heard. "Mrs. Ward, do you intend to accept your late husband's estate today? Or are we all arguing about money that legally does not exist?" My daughter-in-law's mouth opened before her sense did. My son's fingers went white around the chair back. A reporter in the second row actually stopped taking notes. And I, a 69-year-old grandmother in a cardigan one size too brave, realized I was being asked to choose which love to bankrupt, my husband's, my son's, or my own. 6 months earlier, I had slid a sealed envelope across my kitchen table and refused to open it. My name is Helena Ward. I taught algebra for 37 years and married a man who made freight move like music. Daniel built and sold 3 logistics companies, believing correctly that the most powerful magic in commerce was getting the right thing to the right place at the right time with no one noticing the sorcery. When he died, he left me a will that was half gift and half experiment. The gift was the estate. The experiment was the condition. Here is the clause, as brutal and clean as a theorem on a whiteboard. When our son, Adam, married, the estate, $44 million, would pass to me. After a reasonable period, if I believed Adam's marriage was happy and stable, half would pass to him. If not, all of it would remain with me to manage as I deemed fit. He told me the idea one winter evening when our breath drew shapes in the cold and chemo turned his hand shy. He rubbed a basil leaf between his fingers until the whole kitchen smelled like July. "Money magnifies," he said. "If Adam marries well, in the real sense, not the rich sense, let the money enlarge their goodness. If he marries poorly, don't let it buy them a bigger cage." I hated that clause. I signed anyway. Love is messy consent. Adam married in June. He did it wearing a tux that belonged to a more confident man and a smile that insisted everything would be fine. The ceremony was a Pinterest board translated into weather, arches that were more expensive than they looked, centerpieces that smelled like promises, vows read off phones because the printer jammed. He married Kelsey, brilliant smile, sharpened cheekbones, plans that usually started with "when." I was careful with my smile. Not because I disliked her, but because first impressions are the skin of fruit, pretty, misleading, and not where the seeds live. They were broke and photogenic. Combined, they could have bought a bicycle with one good tire and a bell that didn't ring. They moved into my house because numbers bossed them around and pride was exhausted. I gave them the big bedroom, the one with morning light that lays itself across the floor like a measured blessing, and took the guest room without lecture or sigh. Lectures curdle gratitude. Sighs salt the soup. I started 2 lists. Teacher habit. List 1 was groceries. It had neat squares and too much chicken. List 2 was a private thing I never meant to show anyone, the happiness ledger. Ledger makes it sound sentimental. It wasn't. It was a ruthlessly ordinary page I divided into days and behaviors so I could defend my memory against my hope. Hope is a liar who quotes poetry. In the ledger I wrote in verbs, not adjectives. Cooked together. Apologized first. Listened. Slammed door. Shared cost. Mocked. Stood up for. Undermined. Chose smaller slice. Bought chair with rent money. The rule was simple. Never write a sentence I wouldn't read aloud in court. Month 1 performed like a commercial. She made lemon pasta and posted it. He kissed her in doorways they pretended I wasn't watching. They stacked mugs badly and called it minimalism. They called me Mama Hell for a week and Helena after they realized nicknames don't do chores. The ledger filled with checkmarks, a little parade of yes. House rules, shoes by the door, dishes rinsed, rent 0, but groceries and utilities split proportionate to income. It wasn't morality, it was math. Kelsey flashed a practiced smile and said, "Of course." Adam signed the page like it was a truce. By month 2, the marinade of newness had stopped tenderizing the meat. You can hear when money moves in. It rattles drawers and makes people breathe through their teeth. Kelsey stopped eating with us. "I've already had dinner," she'd say, sliding past the table with a plate at chest height like a shield. Her perfume arrived 5 seconds before she did expensive citrus, the smell of someone who expects doors to open. The ledger collected its first blinks. Adam coded later into the night, face tinted the color of fridge light. I brought him tea and unasked for advice about posture. There's a way to keep an adult child near without turning into vines. It looks like silence. It feels like swallowing stones. They were different kinds of ambitious. He was building a company he described with aviation metaphors: runway, lift, altitude, as if success were a physics problem. She was building a life that announced itself at parties: polished shoes, a chair everyone comments on, the right restaurant. Neither is wrong. The trouble begins when one person hears the other's dream as an insult. Month 3 gave me a line I did not want to write: door slam. K, I didn't sign up to live in your mother's museum. A, it's her house. That night, a gold earring lost its twin on the hallway rug. You can learn a lot about a marriage from jewelry that stops traveling as a pair. I had tea with my friend Mara, who has spent her life convincing nervous 6th graders that the clarinet is not a punishment. We taught at the same middle school, her with music, me with math. She has a daughter, Leah, who keeps violets alive through winters I take personally. Mara pours honey like she's paying off a debt. I told her about the clause in Daniel's will and the ledger I was building against my own bias. You always were dangerous with a hypothesis, she said, smiling the way only someone who has loved you for decades is allowed to. I don't want money to rewrite their marriage in real time, I said. I want to know what happens without it. Then I'll know what the money would have magnified. Careful, she said. That's the kind of sentence that thinks it's smarter than it is. Month 4 arrived with a delivery truck and a rug that demanded admiration. Kelsey ordered chairs that resembled art or dentistry, depending on the angle. 2 men carried them through a threshold I had once scrubbed for a housewarming party back when the floor and I were both more forgiving. I checked the household account. The charge wasn't there. She had used her card. People love to call that independence. Adam took me to lunch the next Sunday at a place he couldn't afford but felt obligated to. He unfolded his napkin as if trying to iron his future. Mom, he said, like lifting a heavy box. If you ever wanted to help with a bridge, I'd pay you back. How much is a bridge this season? I asked. He half laughed. Investors are close. I need runway beyond September. How much is your pride? I asked. Because I won't buy that. He blinked. What does that mean? It means I'll lend to the company if you send numbers and accept questions without sighing. I won't subsidize your life. I raised you to stand, not lean. He stared, then nodded, then looked relieved and insulted in the same second. That afternoon, the ledger gained. A asked for bridge. Offered terms. He accepted. Kelsey thanked me the way a billboard thanks attention. Lipstick on both cheeks, a speech about belief. Gratitude can be theater. I don't mind theater. I mind when it tries to sell me tickets to a show I'm already in. Month 5 got loud. Some marriages shatter, others rot. Theirs did both on alternating days. Tuesday's argument was about the garbage. Wednesday's was about the concept of Wednesday. She wanted him home. He wanted to be someone whose absence meant progress. Those men live in different clocks. I took the trash out through weather that had nothing to do with the sky and thought of Daniel's hands trembling in winter and his signature looping through a clause I had agreed to hating. Then came month 6 and the day I decided the truth was kinder than the consequences of delaying it again. It was a Saturday with Basil on the sill and coffee preparing the room for honesty. Kelsey had gone to a class where people lie on mats and declare war on their cores. Adam sat with his laptop and a frown that had grown up too soon. Adam, I said, and the room rearranged itself. He looked up. What's wrong, Mom? I need to tell you something your father wrote. His will. He structured the estate so that when you married, it would pass to me. After a reasonable period, if I believed your marriage was happy and stable, half would pass to you. He didn't blink for too long. How much is the estate? 44 million. His chair made the sound of wood reconsidering its career. His face went through 3 weather systems: shock, then relief, then calculation. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, very quietly, as if volume might make the question less sharp. Because it would have rewritten your marriage, I said. Love shouldn't be audited. You mean we've been scraping by while you observed? I helped where help would teach, not erase lessons. He laughed once and without joy. Unbelievable. The ethics lab I didn't ask to enroll in. Then, as if the calendar could be bargained with, what's a reasonable period? 6 months, I said. The will didn't specify, but sometimes mathematics and mercy share an answer. And, he asked, bracing, are we happy and stable? Before I could answer, the front door delivered the third person in the conversation. Kelsey came in, ponytail high, water bottle swinging, phone like a passport. She saw our faces and smelled money the way sharks smell blood. What's going on? I could have lied. I did not. I told him about the will, I said. What about it? Her voice slowed, as if words had to pass through customs. I told her. Her expression learned a new language and didn't like it. So, she said, precise as a scalpel, we've been living in your house like interns waiting for promotion. Because you were grading me? Grading us? She laughed, and the laugh didn't belong to her mouth. You know what? I won't be measured by a woman who writes on charts and calls it love. Adam turned to me as if he discovered the source of gravity and wanted to sue it. You concealed it. I deferred it. You hid it. I protected it. And who protects me? He shouted. The basil leaf trembled on its stem. Kelsey was already on her phone. I'm filing for divorce, she announced, as if booking a flight. If you have ever watched a bridge you built explode, you will recognize the silence that followed. The next days were not days. They were a string of alarms with coffee between them. Kelsey found lawyers whose website used the word relentless as a compliment. She paid a retainer with money I hadn't known she kept aside. We were served papers that read like a diary written by a wounded stage. The suit argued that Adam had a marital expectancy in the inheritance, that my concealment was emotional fraud, that my house rules amounted to financial control, that the condition in the will was moral coercion. They demanded injunctions, disclosures, damages, and a public scolding. I hired Ruth. If gray could be a superpower, Ruth wore a cape. She spoke in complete paragraphs and read the complaint like it had offended grammar. She can try, Ruth said, but you can't claim what hasn't been accepted. Until you formally enter the rights of inheritance, the money is not property. It is a possibility. In discovery, everything becomes paper. My ledger. Grocery lists. Texts. Receipts for chairs that looked like they bite. The edges of our days got labels. Kelsey took the stand and cried the way rain does on TV, photogenic, at the right moments. She described my kitchen as a place where joy goes to be measured. She called me meticulous, like other people say tyrant. Ruth's cross-examination was a spoon lowering the level of a bowl quietly. Do you have bank records showing any transfer of estate funds to your husband? No. Do you have a clause naming you a beneficiary? No. Do you have proof Mrs. Ward accepted the inheritance? No. Then what are you claiming? That I deserve not to be humiliated by her judgment. Court is not a feelings machine, Ruth said, not unkindly. Their expert used words like deprivation and control and explained that budgeting can be abuse. Ruth asked the expert to name a bill that went unpaid, a meal withheld, a locked door. The expert changed the subject and called it nuance. Meanwhile, Adam lost weight and noise. He slept badly and woke badly and answered his friends' messages with a softness that signaled a crash. He began therapy with a man who wore sweaters on purpose and sent him home with sentences like, "Grief for a life that never happened is still grief." I made soup, which is what mothers do when dictionaries don't help. Kelsey had a talent for spectacle. She gave interviews to a blogger who styled herself as an advocate for wronged spouses and titled the piece, "The Inheritance Mother." She posted a photo of our house with the caption, "Some cages have crown molding." Comments poured in, the way opinions do when they cost nothing but attention. I didn't read most of them. The internet loves villains the way bees love spilled soda. The trial took months because everyone pretended complexity where there was none. The judge stayed patient, which is what real power looks like. When she finally ruled, her voice was quieter than the air. "No one can claim what hasn't been accepted," she said, and every lawyer in the room stopped pretending the floor was interesting. "There is no spousal right to a contingent expectancy. The will is clear. The acceptance has not occurred, and the court will not reward claims built out of speculation and hurt feelings. As for allegations of financial abuse, there is no evidence Mrs. Ward controlled access to funds or necessities. A court is a poor tool for grievances that belong to dinner tables. Kelsey's face turned into a mask that didn't fit. Without marital property to divide and with Adam functionally asset-poor, the settlement was a short story with no plot. She left the courthouse without looking back, which is a kind of looking back. The house exhaled, then slept. Depression has a sound, the absence of steps, and for a while that's what we lived in. Adam didn't want to be seen, so I watched without watching, the way you watch a pot and pretend you aren't. I didn't say I told you so because I didn't. I had told him something else entirely. Then he began to run again, the kind of run that doesn't measure miles so much as breath. He read books about companies that failed and men who learned. He apologized to me for words he had said in a room with basil leaves. I apologized for what he called the experiment. Therapy gifted us a sentence we stuck on the fridge. We can be right about the facts and wrong about the timing. 2 months later, I introduced him to a woman who treats gentleness as an action verb. Leah teaches music the way Mara taught me to listen to rooms. She has a laugh that does not show off and the patience of people who keep plants alive through January. Her shoes came off at the door without my asking, which told me almost everything. On her first visit, she asked if she could help chop onions, then cried when she chopped them, then laughed at herself for crying, then apologized to the onion for accusing it of malice. You cannot fake that sequence. They went for a walk and came back discussing a stray dog that had auditioned to be theirs. We're not ready, Adam said. We could be, Leah said. I wrote in the ledger that night even though I hadn't opened it in weeks. Elle asked if she could help. They dated like adults building a table they both intended to eat at for a long time. They didn't post. They didn't perform. They talked about escrow and conflict styles and who they were on a Tuesday when no one was grading them. He told her about the will before I asked him to. She listened the way people do when they plan to keep going even if the scenery changes. Thank you for telling me now, she said. Secrets are expensive even when the check never comes. 6 months later, in a friend's garden that had the courage to be ordinary, they married under a maple that refused to pretend it wasn't also shedding. The ceremony lasted 20 minutes and felt like a door politely closing behind two people who knew where they were going. Before the wedding, I asked for a conversation Adam didn't want and then did. We sat at the kitchen table because that's where good and terrible things occur in houses like ours. I want a prenuptial agreement, I said. Not because I don't trust Leah. Because I do. He looked at me with that expression that means I know you're right. I'm deciding how much I hate it. Draft it. Leah read it and kissed my cheek. Thank you for treating me like someone who can handle grown-up things, she said. And that is how I knew I had chosen the right daughter-in-law the second time. She didn't confuse boundaries with rejection. 6 weeks after the wedding, on a Tuesday that didn't know it was about to become important, I took Daniel's will to Ruth's office and signed what needed signing. I entered into the rights of inheritance. There was no champagne because delighted restraint is a family tradition. The numbers moved from maybe to is. I did not buy a boat. I did not buy a coat that would make my neighbors search the brand quietly. I funded 3 scholarships at the school where I taught. I wrote a check to the youth orchestra where Leah works because music is math that learned to breathe. I set aside money for a program that teaches teenagers how not to be fooled by a spreadsheet with charisma. I stabilized the shelter that had saved the stray dog they almost adopted. And then I established a trust for Adam that doesn't care about moods. It cares about quarterly reports and honest mistakes and punishes the kind of lies people tell themselves when they think no one is watching. Half, as the will promised, became his. Not in cash. Not in a way that makes your hands slippery. In a trust with a woman named Constance overseeing distributions, because if you can hire a Constance, you should. She reminds me of you, Adam said after their first meeting, half laughing, half terrified. Good, I said. I am busy. We took a walk that evening under sycamores that behave like gossiping ants leaning in. Leah held Adam's hand and my arm. People driving by saw 3 ordinary people out for a digestive affair. No one saw the numbers. If they had, they would have seen that they were smaller than the decision we'd made months earlier, to tell the truth before it started telling us. Life after money did not become a storybook. That's not how money works. It just stops being the third voice in every conversation. They still argued on Thursdays, sometimes about trivial things that were not trivial at all. They learned that compromise is not the spot nobody wants, it's the place both can stand and still reach the other. They put Pilot the Stray on a waiting list for their home, which is a sentence I didn't know existed. When his turn arrived, he came home and immediately chose Leah as his salaried human. He sleeps with one paw touching whoever's fear is loudest. People asked me to talk about Kelsey. They asked because they wanted to know where to put their anger. It's heavy and everyone hopes there's a locker somewhere. Here is what I know. She married ambition and discovered it was not a synonym for security. She married the idea of a man and resented the volume of the work it took to become him. She tried to collect on a promise the law never made and learned that a certain kind of suffering attracts microphones, but not judges. She wrote me a letter 6 months after the ruling with tidy handwriting that made her name look like an apology without verbs. It said there were new circumstances and asked if I might reconsider the family covenant. I wrote back exactly one sentence: I wish you healing. People argue with verdicts. They don't argue with blessings. The ledger still lives in my desk. I open it sometimes to remind myself that memory should be a witness, not a novelist. I thumb the pages with their verbs and their stubborn refusal to embroider. I add a line every so often, not about grades, but about maintenance. A listened without fixing. L chose smaller slice. A called Mara for a recipe he could have searched. L told me to rest, then stood in the doorway until I did. There were seasons after that, loud and quiet. There was the investor dinner where a man with a loud watch suggested Adam put his mother in her place, and Leah, smiling like a violin that knows it has strings, said she put herself there. The dessert table is over your left shoulder. There was the magazine profile that wanted a villain and, disappointed to find none, turned us into a parable about modern wealth and ethical maternal gatekeeping. There was the day the program I funded sent out its first cohort of students who could now smell a predatory APR from a block away. 2 of them wrote to say the class had helped save their grandparents' home. I printed the message and put it on the fridge next to the sentence about timing. There was the morning I fell on the back steps and insisted I was fine while holding my knee like it would answer back. Leah called the doctor and installed a rail that afternoon, framing it as a gift to Pilot's dignity. Adam pretended to argue, then he painted the rail the exact color of the trim without being asked. Pride and pragmatism shook hands. There was the call from Ruth about a distant cousin who thought the will should have included him because he once showed Daniel a shortcut to the airport. We'll handle it, Ruth said, and did. There was the afternoon I stood in the school auditorium, watching scholarship recipients adjust their collars before walking across the stage to collect envelopes. I used to stand there as a teacher, counting heads. Now I stood there as a benefactor, counting hearts. It felt less different than people think. There were small mercies that didn't make headlines. The day Adam told Leah she was right before anyone kept score. The night Leah woke me at 2 because the smoke alarm chirped, and I couldn't hear it with my hearing aids out. The Saturday we spent labeling spices after realizing 3 different jars contained 3 different kinds of confusion. The way Pilot sits at the top of the stairs like a sentry whose paycheck is kisses. Once, months after the dust settled into furniture we forgot to keep dusting, I took the ledger out and added an appendix. Teacher habit. At the top of a clean page, I wrote notes on what I would do differently if I had been a different person. Then I laughed and crossed it out. There is no such person available for hire. You are the only instrument you get to play out of tune and all. Still, if you want a lesson, I can give you one, and it is as unromantic as a spreadsheet. Tell the truth when the truth will build, not burn. For us, that day was the day before the marriage would have lied about itself for the money. That's why I told him in our kitchen, not on the way to the altar or 10 months into the betting pool the world had made of our life. Sometimes I drive by the courthouse on errands that do not involve justice and remember the feel of that room, the sound the air makes when a decision that is also a relief lands. I remember the judge's sentence like a liturgy. No one can claim what hasn't been accepted. I apply it to other things now. Grief you refuse to name. Apologies you won't hear. Compliments you bat away because someone earlier taught you suspicion. Acceptance is a power switch. Money only sometimes needs it. When Pilot turned 5, we had a small party that was really an excuse to see friends we don't see enough. Leah made cupcakes dogs can eat. Adam grilled like a man who had watched 3 tutorials and felt invincible. I sat with Mara and talked about our students, mine now grown enough to send their children to the very classrooms where I once taught, and about how age has made us more radical in small ways. We have begun to say, no, thank you, without writing an essay. Mara looked at me over the rim of a glass that had sweated itself into usefulness. Do you ever think about the other version? She asked. The one where you told him before the wedding? Sometimes, I said. In that version, I am either a villain who bribed her son into a marriage that wasn't ready or a savior who rescued him from a mistake with a checkbook. In this version, I am a woman who waited and then told the truth. I sleep fine. You always were good at picking the sentence you could live with, she said. That's a skill I wish we taught. We do, I said. We call it revision. Another season turned. Adam's company did not become a rocket, it became a train that runs on time. He hired people who like to sleep. He learned that saying no is the difference between a strategy and a slideshow. He paid back my bridge loan on a plain Tuesday with a cashier's check that looked disappointed to be so unceremonious. We took a picture and then immediately deleted it because the moment belonged to us. Leah kept her violets alive and then kept me alive in small ways you don't see until the day it would have been easier not to. She accused me of being tired on days I performed not tired. She made me take the flu shot and then fed me soup until I forgave her for being right. She loaded my phone with recordings of student recitals so I could listen to hope graduating into competence. A year after the court case, a producer from a daytime show called. They wanted a segment titled, The Mother Who Tested a Marriage with Millions. They offered travel, a hotel with a view, and hair and makeup that would make me look relatable but aspirational. I said, I am already both, without a spray. The producer laughed like we were friends. I wasn't auditioning. Kelsey appeared again only in stories people told me secondhand. She got a new job. She moved to a new apartment with windows the size of opinions. She dated a man who liked watches more than punctuality. None of that is my business. She sent one more letter, polite and brittle, with a note that said, I hope you can see now that I was reacting to pressure. I wrote back, pressure reveals, it rarely invents. Then I put the letters in a folder labeled closure, which is a lie you file away so you can live. On the 2nd anniversary of Leah and Adam's wedding, we ate in the garden 3 salads that looked like confidence and a cake that tasted like forgiveness. Adam stood to make a toast and promptly lost his words, which is what happens when what you feel is bigger than your sentence structure. He finally said, thank you for not saving me the way I wanted and for saving me anyway, and sat down relieved. Leah squeezed his hand. I pretended not to wipe my eyes because grandmothers are allowed to be sentimental, but I still like to surprise the room. Near the end, if there can be an end to a story that keeps changing its hair, I went to the drawer where the ledger lives and wrote one line at the bottom of the last page, in the only ink that matters, accepted. Not the money, the day, the son, the daughter-in-law who is exactly herself. The future that refuses to be predicted but finds you when you're busy chopping onions. The will I hated and signed. The quiet revenge of refusing to let greed decide how the scene ends. The steady thrill of watching 2 people choose maintenance over spectacle. Happiness is not an event. It is maintenance. We maintain. We put our shoes by the door. We rinse dishes. We lend with terms and love without them. We fund scholarships and buy dog cupcakes and hang rails by the back steps for the people we pretend we aren't protecting. We marry people who don't require an audience to be kind. We forgive people who auditioned for a role they didn't have the patience to rehearse. We answer reporters with silence and our families with soup. We tell the truth before it grows teeth. And when the day comes, and it will, when someone we love is tempted to claim a future they have not yet accepted, we will lower our voices until the whole room has to lean in, and we will ask the only question that matters. Is this the kind of truth that builds? If it is, we will sign. If it isn't, we will wait. And the room, recognizing the shape of mercy, will hold its breath and resist the ancient urge to applaud. I didn't inherit a fortune. I inherited a timer. I waited. Then I opened my hands. The chandelier stayed up. The house, which has survived judgment and lemon pasta and chairs with opinions, is still here. And when the light hits the floor just so, it looks like a grid, a ledger laid out by the sun, inviting us, as ever, to write what happened, in verbs only, without pretending. Cooked together. Ironed collar. Paid bridge loan. Signed trust. Installed rail. Walked dog. Called mother. Called mother back. Laughed. Slept. Waited. Accepted. Divided. Shared. Built.
Your watch to the end. Be click here. You will hear another story from my grandma.